GoForThe2.com in with the Week 12 college football predictions. What can you say about week number 11? But number 2, 3, and 4 all losing for the first time since 1985 sets up another great weekend of college football this coming Saturday. Let's get right into the predictions. An SEC battle in the East between Tennessee and Missouri. Tennessee needs to win this game to win the SEC East. If Florida loses to LSU this Saturday, we'll see how it plays out. But you look at last week, Tennessee with a dominating performance, 49-36 over Kentucky. But in that win, Kentucky rushed for 443 yards on that Volunteer defense. This defense is atrocious in run support. And on the flip side, you have a team in Missouri that's not quitting at the end of the year. They're 3-7 overall, but they're fighting very hard for their new first-year head coach, former defensive coordinator Barry Odom, and they picked up a solid victory last week against Vanderbilt, 26-17. You look at the last 2 weeks of offensive production by Missouri overall. In the loss to South Carolina 2 weeks ago, where they lost that battle 31-21, they put up 465 yards of total offense. They followed that up last week against Vanderbilt with a 481-yard total offensive performance. Those are two solid defenses in South Carolina and Vanderbilt, and they were able to move the football consistently on both of those teams. I expect Missouri to be in this battle from start to finish. I really feel that from an offensive perspective, they'll be able to run the football on the Volunteer defensive front seven and really slow down the tempo in this ballgame. Defensively, I expect Barry Odom to have a solid game plan in place, and I do feel that Missouri pushes Tennessee to the limit this coming weekend. I'll call for the upset. I think Missouri gets the outright upset, 33-30 over Tennessee. I'm not sold on Josh Dobbs in a big spot. And more importantly, this team in Missouri is not quitting at the end of the year because they have a solid first-year head coach in Barry Odom. So I like the way they're making progressions at the end of the year, and a lot of pressure on this Tennessee team to come through at home. A lot of expectations and a lot of pressure on quarterback Josh Dobbs. Don't like that in a big spot this coming weekend. Look for Missouri to get the upset over Tennessee this Saturday. On the flip side, you have a battle in Baton Rouge between LSU and Florida. This was the game that got canceled due to the hurricane in Florida about 4 or 5 weeks ago, but it was supposed to be in the Swamp. It is now in Death Valley. That's a big turnaround for this ballgame. You look at the series overall since 2011. LSU has dominated the series. They've won 4 of the last 5 by 12 points per game. They won last year by 7 points. Florida moved the football with quarterback Treon Harris at night against that LSU Tiger defense. But you look at LSU over the last couple of weeks, they lost that battle to Alabama and Jalen Hurts. They held Alabama to only 107 total passing yards in that matchup. They followed that up last week with a dominating road performance in Fayetteville, both on the offense and defensive lines against a solid Arkansas team that beat Florida 31-10. You look at LSU, they were able to rush for 390 yards on that Arkansas defensive front seven. You look at both of the quarterbacks, too, in this battle. Danny Etling and Austin Appleby both were at Purdue, so expect both of these guys to be into this matchup. But I like the defense of LSU. I think they're playing lights out, not just in the front seven with Arden Key, but in the back end of that secondary led by Adams. He's a big playmaker for that defense. He's always around the football, and he's solid in run support. And I love what Dave Aranda has done with the defensive scheme. You've seen progression by this LSU Tiger defensive front seven over the course of the year now. And when you look at the offensive weapons by Florida, I think they're very limited in terms of what they can do in terms of stretching LSU's defense vertically. I think that this is a really bad matchup for Florida. I do think that LSU dominates this ball game from start to finish. I really think Geis breaks out and Leonard Fournette gets involved. Look for Malachi Dupree and Traven Durrell to test Jalen Tabor and Quincy Wilson Jr. in this battle. And I do think that LSU gets a convincing 24-point victory at home. Even though it's an early start, it's not under the lights. LSU dominates this ball game and knocks Florida out of contention, possibly for the SEC East title. But if Tennessee loses like I think they will, Florida will still win this SEC East and go to Atlanta to face Alabama, a rematch of last year. We'll see how it plays out. Another intriguing battle is taking place in the Big 12. It is TCU and Oklahoma State. I liked Texas Tech last week to push Oklahoma State to the limit. They did. They lost that ball game 45-44. They missed an extra point with about 1 minute left in that ball game. Now Oklahoma State goes on the road to face TCU. TCU's coming out of a bye week. Haven't played that well this year, but they dominated Baylor 2 weeks ago. Gary Patterson, traditionally off a bye, very strong game planner. The one game that they lost this year was against West Virginia, where they did come out of a bye. But I do feel that TCU matches up very well on the outside and can stretch Oklahoma State's defensive secondary vertically. I know Oklahoma State is a hot team. Mike Gundy and that staff have that offense clicking with Mason Rudolph. But I really like Kenny Hill, and I like TCU at home to dominate this matchup. When I say dominate, I think they win this ball game by double digits, 13-17 points. I expect TCU to pull out a solid home victory. The game is on grass. Oak State not used to playing on grass either. I think that'll factor into this battle as well. And I do feel that Gary Patterson will have a solid game plan in place for that defense to force Mason Rudolph into mistakes. TCU gets the double-digit victory over Oklahoma State this coming Saturday. Big Ten battle between Northwestern and Minnesota. Very intriguing battle. Northwestern coming off a dominating double-digit victory over Purdue. Pat Fitzgerald and that team playing very well. But this is back-to-back road games for Northwestern, and they are facing a very solid offense and defensive lines in Minnesota. This is a very solid club that's rushing for 197 yards per game with running back Rodney Smith. They also have a big play quarterback in Mitch Leidner. But more importantly, their defensive front seven, very solid in run support, only giving up 122 rushing yards per game, and they create turnovers. This is a team that is plus 11 in turnover margin. I like Minnesota here. I think the weather might factor into this ball game. Not sold on Northwestern on back-to-back road games, and I do think Rodney Smith and Mitch Leidner are the difference in this ball game. Look for Minnesota to pull out a 10-point victory at home over Northwestern this coming Saturday. Very intriguing battle in the ACC. I call for Pittsburgh to play Clemson very, very tough. They got the outright victory 43-42 over Clemson when Dabo Swinney decided to go for it on 4th down and 1. Deshaun Watson had that critical interception on the goal line that really changed the momentum of that ball game, cut the deficit after Pittsburgh scored to 42-40, allowed the Panthers to be in striking distance. If they would have kicked the field goal, they would have won probably by double digits in that battle. Now Clemson goes on the road to face Wake Forest. Wake Forest playing very well. They were up on Louisville for much of the game, 12-0 against the Cardinals. Lamar Jackson, they kept him in check, but Wake Forest struggles with speed teams on their schedule. You look at the second half, actually the fourth quarter of that ball game, Lamar Jackson, Brandon Radcliffe were really able to exploit the Wake Forest defensive secondary, and more importantly, the defensive front seven wore down because of attrition. They really played a lights-out ball game for 3 quarters, but they could not maintain the momentum and the tempo of Louisville's offense. Now they limp back home to play another up-tempo attack in Clemson that's coming off a loss. Clemson needs to win. Clemson won this ball game by 20 points last year in Death Valley. So expect Deshaun Watson and this crew to really start fast on the road in Salem. I know people are expecting the upset, but I don't see it. This is a really bad matchup for Wake Forest in terms of they struggle with teams that can stretch them vertically. Clemson put up 640 total yards of offense against Pittsburgh's defense. I expect the same on the road against Wake. I think Clemson dominates this matchup by 35 points or more. I think Dabo Swinney will have the teams focused. Louisville probably will be in the top 4, but if Clemson can dominate and run the table and win the ACC championship, they will probably be there. So look for Clemson to rebound in a big way, and Clemson wins this ball game by 35 points or more. Just think that Clemson has way too much speed. Not sold on John Wolford, not sold on Hinton, the quarterbacks. And more importantly, I don't think Wake Forest has the playmakers to stretch Clemson's secondary vertically. So I think that's a key matchup in this ball game. I think if they can run the football, they can make it close, but they wore down at the end of that ball game by the speed of Lamar Jackson and Louisville. Think they could be a tired team entering this battle against Clemson. Bad matchup. Look for Clemson to win this ball game by 35 points or more. Another intriguing battle is Kansas State and Baylor. Baylor lost their quarterback, Seth Russell, to a dislocated ankle. He will not play in this ballgame. Freshman quarterback Zach Smith will get the start. You remember last year on the road in Manhattan, Jarrett Stidham got the start against Kansas State, and they won that battle against Bill Snyder and the crew because of the scheme of the Baylor Bears. I know they've lost 3 straight now. They got blown out by Oklahoma 45-24, but Shaq Linwood does come back now from suspension. I expect Baylor to be in this ballgame. I just think when you look at it overall, Baylor did put up 500 yards of total offense on Oklahoma's defense. I know Kansas State likes to run the football, methodically work the clock, but they really struggle against speed teams. And I still think Baylor, with the freshman quarterback, dominates this ballgame at home. I know they lost 3 straight, but I really think speed kills. And I think Baylor at home dominates this ball game by about 14 to 17 points. I know Kansas State fighting to become bowl eligible. They're coming out of a bye week, but I'm still not sold on Jesse Ertz and this offense that's pedestrian at best, only averaging about 360 total yards per game. I really think that the speed on the outside of Baylor is the difference. They might look to run the football early on and work off of play action, but Zach Smith can really stretch that defense vertically. He's a big kid. He's about 6'2", about 220 pounds, completed 6 of 14 passes against Oklahoma, 144 yards and 1 touchdown. So he got his feet wet. Expect him to be ready. And more importantly, there's not a lot of game film on him for Bill Snyder and the group to game plan on. So I think that's another factor. Look for Jim Grobe and the offensive staff to really work the game plan towards Zach Smith's strengths and force Kansas State to make adjustments throughout the game. And I think that's the difference. Look for Baylor to pick up a double-digit victory over Kansas State this weekend. Another intriguing battle is in the Pac-12. Washington coming off a disappointing loss against USC. They got outworked on both sides of the ball. They did not run the football effectively. Their offensive line broke down at critical junctures and put a lot of pressure on Jade Browning and the offense to respond and match Sam Darnold score for score. They now are at home. A lot of pressure on this team to win out because they're on the outside looking in right now because not a lot of people are giving the Pac-12 respect. But this is a very tricky battle for Washington overall. When you talk about teams matching up well against other teams, Arizona State matches up very well against Washington. They've won the last 3 by 17 points per game. So I think they're solid in run support as well, only giving up 125 rushing yards on the ground. They have Demario Richard and a solid offensive line to really methodically work down the clock. And I expect Arizona State to be in this ballgame from start to finish. In the end, expect Washington to pick up a 13-point victory, but Arizona State is in this game from start to finish. Expect the Sun Devils to play with the Huskies this coming weekend. Those are the picks for week number 12. Stay with me all season long at GoForThe2.com. College football is the best. Listen to the radio show this coming Saturday between 10 and 12 p.m. Eastern Time. SBNationRadio.com and FantasyFNTSY.com /radio. College football is the best. I just love talking about it.